Welcome to the Culture Curators podcast. We're here to share insight, information, and resources to help you become a more effective salon business owner.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a really important episode. We have a fire. For those listening on audio, we have a fireplace next to us in the evening. We're setting the mood for a really important conversation, and I would say slightly challenging. So today's topic is going to be around handling a walkout, handling turnover, and when stylists move on. Let's get started. Jill, why don't you take it away?
Well, I have to say, unfortunately, I have experience with this topic. You know, I'll never forget having a massive walkout. Basically, everybody left my business except for one person that was on maternity leave and one other person who was an esthetician. And, you know, losing 20-some people at one time is devastating. You go from, million down to 100,000 overnight. And what I thought at that time was I was the only one that experienced something like that. And I was so filled with shame and guilt and anger. And I just had so much going on inside. And I really thought that I was alone. And I came to find out a couple of years later that I wasn't alone. That this is something that happens, and whether you have a mass exodus or you have a slow trickle, I think that nearly every salon owner goes through it at one point in their ownership career if they're in it for a long enough time.
Yeah, it's a reality. I remember a good friend was like, "You're not really a salon owner until you've had a walkout."
Oh, jeez.
And it's hard, man. I think the slow trickle or the all at once. Obviously they're different dynamics, and it's going to create different feelings.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, what's important for the owner is to do your best to reflect on the why. And that's really hard to do when you're stuck in the emotion of it, and if it's happening still. Meaning that slow trickle, you don't necessarily know when the faucet's going to stop trickling, and that creates a lot of unrest in your heart, in your mind. It creates, when you're having the slow walkout, it creates a lot of unrest, obviously, in the team, because they're feeling the dynamic, they're feeling the change, they're talking amongst each other. They typically will know who's leaving far before you will.
Right.
And it makes you feel, again, this kind of goes back to that topic of it's lonely being a salon owner a lot of the time. It feels very lonely, and it feels, like you said, that there's just this level of upset and discouragement and almost like a feeling of defeat that I think hits us when this happens. And I've been a part of it too, and it's as far as it's happened to me, and it is. I think it's the hardest thing that we deal with in the business. I really do.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, it shakes you to your core. And I remember when I went through it, Michael Cole called me nearly every single day, and he said, "Jill, are you going to be better today, or are you going to be bitter?" And I would say the right answer. I'm going to be better, Michael. I'm going to be better. But you know what? I wasn't. I was still really bitter, because that's who we are. That's the dream that we have, and we build it to a certain point, and we're really dependent on the team. And if the team, for whatever reason, chooses to leave, that's our dream. Yeah. That has just gone. That's the people that we've helped become successful that are gone now and have moved on. And in my case, they built another salon down the road. And
did they all go there?
Yeah, they did. At that time, they did all go there. And, what I had to do, though, is I had to really reflect on why. And I had to take a serious look at why would they all leave. And it wasn't their fault. I have to take ownership as the leader. And it took me 2 years to discover that. It really did, because I was stuck in in the vortex of swirling and swirling and swirling. And I wasn't able to keep anybody after that. There was constant turnover and stuff. And it was because of me, because I needed to heal from that. And I needed to get better, as Michael said. And I needed to learn from my mistakes, because at the end of the day, I was responsible because I was the business owner. And it was because of business choices that I made that created them to want to leave.
Right. Yeah, I think that goes back to that earlier point of like really analyzing the why. When I was younger, when I first got my first salon job behind the chair, I was 18 years old. And the salon owner that I ended up getting the job at her salon had just experienced a walkout. And 6 people, 7 people, something like that, had all left at once as well. They opened up a salon right down the street. It was actually like 4 blocks away, so it was super close. So I was kind of thrust into this odd situation, which was a good situation for me because, she was overwhelmed with clientele, so the overflow came right to my chair, obviously. And she slowly rebuilt, and I saw the pain that she was going through, and I saw how difficult it was, but I hadn't known it really because I wasn't a part of it prior. And then fast forward, 15 years later, and I've experienced it in a different way, not all at once, but like that slow trickle we were talking about. And I think, for a lot of commission salon owners now, because suite ownership is such a popular thing, it's easier for a stylist to move on and not have the pressure that we used to have when it was like the build out. And, a lot of them don't even want to build necessarily a team. They just want to go off on their own independently. And that kind of comes along with the way social media is and the way that hairdressing has become a very independent-based kind of industry in a lot of ways. And so I had to kind of analyze, and I'm still honestly in the process of analyzing the why. And I think a big part of it is when you have the departure conversation with people, it's really asking the right questions and being willing to hear. Hopefully they're willing to be honest with you. That's what you don't have control over. And you're probably not always going to get the exact or full story. And more than likely, you tend to find things out afterward. But either way, I think if there's been a scenario where, and I've had to kind of wrap my mind around just the gratitude around it, where if someone's been with you for a long period of time and they just look to move on and just better themselves and move on and go do something different and be on their own, they're not doing anything wrong. And 2 things can be true at the same time. You could be happy for them and sad for yourself, and hurt for yourself as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the bottom line. All of us as business owners, salon business owners, at one time left where we were at to open our own business. And so, again, I think it's about analyzing, and I think it's about really discovering the true why behind what's happening. It's one thing if one person wants to go out and open up their own salon or open up their own suite and they think that it's in their best interest. We have to let them go, and we have to let them go with love.
Right.
And we have to celebrate all that they've done and all that they have become within our organization, but then we have to let them go. It's a little bit different when there's that slow trickle of continual leaving, or if it's a massive walkout.
Yeah, there's different dynamics. If you had a big walkout all at once, you have to analyze, okay, what was my role in it? And I think that's the most difficult question to ask as a leader, but it's also the most important because you have to be real with yourself and you can't fake it. It's like, what actions have I taken over the last X period of time that led to this?
Yeah.
And I think also what's really hard is that you can be happy for people, but the reality too is it hurts your bottom line dramatically when it's 1 person, 2 persons, 3 and beyond. And when you have, and it also creates disruption not only with your other team members that stay on board or then starts to maybe get them to question if they should stay on board, but it also disrupts your client base, right? Because if you've had 1 person's 2, 3, 4, well, what happens is one client was booked with them and then they're booked with the next one who leaves and the next one who leaves, and now this client has jumped from 4 different hairdressers in a period of time. And I think that it's an amazing thing when that client sticks with your brand even after that. I've
Absolutely.
had many of those clients
Right.
where it's like, no matter who we have in the salon, they want to stick with the brand, and you have to be really proud of that, and you have to also be really honest. So there's no like getting around the fact that it's quieter in the room.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
the energy's different.
Yep.
Clients walk in like, wow, it's quiet today.
Oh,
Man.
don't you love that when you hear that?
So it's like, yeah, I'm always saying things like, we're going through a challenging time, but it's also an exciting time because we get to redefine and rebuild. And rebuilding is a part of business in a lot of ways. Rebuilding is a part of sports, and it's a part of life, right? And
is.
you have to choose your attitude with it. And I also think you have to give yourself time to process and almost mourn or grieve through what you've experienced and learn from it to then be better from it. And again, all of this is really, really difficult because you're dealing with a high level of emotion, and you're also dealing with your bottom line affected. So now you're like concerned about paying bills and payroll and all this stuff, and it can be really, really painful. Like there's nights where you're just up at night, or there's tears, and it's just, there's a lot that goes into this.
Oh, absolutely. I remember checking my checkbook every single day, calling the bank to hear what my balance
You're
was.
dating yourself with that one.
Sorry. I said this was a while ago that I experienced it. And, what I was told when I did experience is that I was going to have to spend more time and more energy than I've ever had to spend in my business, and that I was going to have to invest monetarily in my business. And if I wasn't prepared to do that, to build it, then shut the doors. And I really thought about it, and I thought, no, that's not the way I want to leave.
Right.
And so I wanted to rebuild, and we were able to financially put back into the business. And it doesn't happen overnight. It took.
How long did it take for you to feel like there was like a full-on rebuild, and we're like, okay, now we got momentum again, and we're back?
Well, I'm going to say it took me 2 years to ask for help. Because I was too proud. I didn't think anybody else went through that. And so I didn't want to tell anybody else what I had been through, like they didn't know, right? And so it took me 2 years before I was able to really ask for help. And then once I asked for help, then within a year, the business really started to turn around. And within 2 years, and I'll say this was in 2008, when everybody knows, the economy tanked, we were having our greatest, most successful year that we had in the history of the salon. And so it took a lot of time. Part of that was because of me, because I was too prideful. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was just fear, whatever it was. I didn't want to share that with anyone, and I didn't want to reach my hand out and say, I need help.
Listen, we all have ego to a degree, I don't consider you or myself like egotistical people, but we have pride, and we also, when you've put your blood, sweat, tears, income, like your own money that you had like saved up, and your tip money, like, what I mean? All of that, like your shoebox money.
Right.
It's like you've done all of this for the business, and you've also really, at that time, more than likely, you've spent a ton of time and energy in training these people. And then also, we've talked about this on other episodes where it's like, if you've been going through the process of raising prices and things like that, you've probably been feeding and moving clients to those people's chairs. And the reality is the client gets to choose, but a lot of times that's their client now, and the client's going to follow them. And that's also the challenging part. I was talking to someone, I don't remember this exactly who, but we were talking about like the differences between certain industries. And it's like, when you're, a restaurant owner, if you lose waiters or waitresses or servers, yes, that's going to hurt because it's going to disrupt your the consistency and the flow, and of course the training and all that. But it's not like those people don't come to the restaurant to eat anymore, your customers, because of a waiter or a waitress, you know? It's different in the hair world because those clients leave with them. So if you lost 20 people, all of those clients have moved on. If I'm losing 1, 2, 3, 4 every few months over X span of time, then clients are continuing to walk out the door, and you have to do that much more to start to rebuild a clientele. You as the owner more than likely will need to get behind the chair more than you maybe prefer, and much more than what your original plan that you were working toward kind of dictated. And that's the really, I think, one thing that I really want you to hear today when you're listening to this podcast. You're going to need to change course and adjust your sales. And that's a really hard process. And even though the business isn't necessarily where you had hoped it would be at this point, you have to push through the discouragement in order to get to the other side. Because if you continue to swirl in just the sadness and, you know, the depression of it, it's not going to serve you or anyone else that has decided to stay on board. And it's also going to then spill into anyone else that you try to bring in moving forward. So those are really, really key elements, because like you said, you know, you do need to process it. You do need to take some time, but it's like how much time is too much, where now it's like the detriment of the business.
Oh, definitely. I spent way too much time swirling, and it absolutely impacted new employees coming on, and I had a high turnover rate because of it.
Yeah.
And so as we talk about a walkout, whether it's slow, whether it's trickle, whether it's combination, I think that some of the things that I want people to hear and to understand is that the first thing is, you know what, you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not the first one, nor will you be the last one to experience such a tragedy. And it is a tragedy. And you need to ask for help. Learn from my mistake, learn from others' mistakes. You need to ask for help, and you need to reach out your hand. You need to reassure anyone who's left, whether it's one person, 5 people, whoever it is, that the business is going to be okay.
That's really key.
You have to let
You have
them
to give
know,
them hope.
because they're afraid, and that's exactly right. We have to give them hope that there's going to be a better tomorrow.
Well, they're
That
thinking
they
you
are.
might close.
Of course, that's what they're thinking. I had that asked to me several times.
Yeah, same.
How are we going to ever make it? Are we going to close? And then it turns to them. What am I going to do? And so we have to reassure them that you're going to do everything in your power to put back into the business, to invest in them, to appreciate and show gratitude that they chose to stay.
Right.
And that you're willing to do whatever it takes for the betterment of them and for the business.
Yeah, and it becomes a point too where you need to shift your focus toward encouraging those people that have stayed behind. And a lot of the ones that might have stayed with you might be a little bit younger.
Yeah.
So they're still building their clientele. Well, now this creates a really great opportunity for them, because there is going to be overflow. There are going to be clients that want to come in. There's going to be new clients that are still calling. So you need to be ready. And I think that's why we always preach training, because it's like, I always think about like a farm system with like baseball teams, you know, and just making sure that you're building up the ranks, you know, that the next generation that can come on board. Now, you're never going to be able to replace experience. You know, so if you've lost 5, 8, 10 people or whatever that have 3, 4, 5 or beyond years of experience, you can't just replace that. It's just, you can't microwave that. There's no such thing. So what you have to do is then, you know, realign, reimagine, and change. And changing is really hard when you're dealing with this kind of dynamic. And you have to have some really honest conversations with clients as well. So again, it's like even getting clients excited about what's happening, and also just being honest and real about it. Because if a client's coming in and what they used to see was hustle and bustle at a certain day, at a certain time, and then they come in and they don't see that, again, they vocalize that. And they can feel if you're just like kind of skating around it, or if you're trying to make an excuse about it and just not being honest or real. You don't have to give the dirty details. You don't have to go into depth. I recommend that you actually don't. It's more about looking forward, not behind. You can never move forward and grow with your head like turned around. You have to look forward, and you have to like, you have to figure out a way to get yourself excited about it too. And I find that to be very difficult when you're in the midst of such a devastating and heartbreaking thing.
Well, it is very difficult. I mean, how do you show up really excited when you've just lost
Yeah,
everything?
it's tough.
It's really, really tough. And it goes back to, we did an episode not too long ago on mental health and well-being. And we have to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves first.
Yeah.
Because you need to take care of yourself first before you can ever take care of anybody else or take care of your business.
Yeah.
And so what is it that you need to do to help yourself? What is it that you can do to get better and not be bitter? And it's so important. And take the time that you need, because you're going through a loss.
Yeah.
And whether it's a loss of a person or a loss of business, you're still grieving. And you need to be able to allow yourself to go through that. Don't get stuck there. Don't buy real estate
Right.
in the grieving process, but be able to grieve, align yourself with people who can help you, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whether it's a life coach or a business
spouse,
coach,
yep.
your spouse, your sibling, whomever, your parents, someone that you can talk to that's a safe place and it will land safely. And then make that strategy about what you're going to do. How are you going to get better? Because the choice is ultimately yours.
Yeah.
You do have that choice, and Michael Cole was absolutely right. You have a choice today. Are you going to be bitter or are you going to be better? And you have to answer with your heart, not what you know that other person wants you to say, but you truly have to answer with your heart, and you have to believe that it's possible for you to get better.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too that you control and manage the rhetoric and conversations that are happening within the team that stay behind, because again,
Yeah.
they're swirling in it, and if they're having, broke room banter, it can become really, really toxic really quickly.
Yeah.
And they could be planning their exit with
Yep.
each other too.
Yep.
And they could be losing trust in you as a leader and in where the business is going. So again, you need to take control really quickly, and you need to grab a hold of the people that want to stay on board. And then for those that don't want to stay on board, allow them to leave, and leave swiftly. So you always say, like, we hold no prisoners here,
Right.
So it's like, I had to actually do that. I had to have like the toughest conversation of my entire career, in the midst of this, with people that stayed on board. And I had to like draw a line in the sand, like, which side are you going to be on at this point? You're either going to stick around and be all in or not. And either is okay, but the 1 foot in, 1 foot out is not okay.
Right.
And I think you have to call a spade and be real and be honest and have courage and like look people in the eye and get some real answers about what you need to know and what course of action that you're willing to take to move forward. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to really set like a new and hit the refresh button in a way, I think another thing that can be really damaging to you is if you continue to look at the old numbers. That is
that's
upsetting.
torture.
It's just torture. So if you're a goal setter, the way that we coach it and the way that you know what your numbers are, when you start now goal setting, you need to goal set in the reality of now, not in the reality of yesterday. And that's also a painful process, because now it's like you're feeling like you're starting all over in a way, or you're feeling like you climbed this mountain, this big, huge mountain, and you fell halfway back. And it's like you look back up and you're like, how the hell am I going to do this again? But you can, and you will, but it's not going to happen as quick as you want. And it's going to be painful, but it gets a little bit easier each day as you continue
Every
to choose
day.
the right attitude.
Right. You choose the right attitude. I remember I called one of my friends and was talking to him, and he was in the industry, and he said, everything I want to say to you is in the video, and I'm trying to think of the name of the video, The Secret. The Secret. And I said, okay, I'll watch it, you know. And so every single morning I would have it on. I wouldn't be able to watch it because I was getting ready for work, but I would have it on. I could memorize. I memorized. I knew what was coming up to a certain point until I had to leave every day. And then who knows what they said after that. But it was enough to give me hope. It was enough to start to change, like your shirt says, mindset. Mindset matters.
See that?
And it's just a simple video. It's like aligning yourself and finding the positivity, and what we feed this is what's in our heart and what comes out of our mouth.
Yeah, and I think, with your mindset, along that, it's like when you decide what your mindset's going to be, you have instantly gained power and strength. And the reality about that, I think that I find really interesting, is that nothing has actually changed outside of something happening internally. But it gives you now the right position in your mind to be able to start making the right actions that then impact change. So whether that's you getting back, behind the chair, whether it's you looking at your schedule, figuring out what you're going to do, whether it's designing a new event, whether it's looking at a new product line, whatever it is that you're going to start to infuse some new and exciting energy into the business so that you can excite yourself, inspire your team, help each other, whether it's pulling your front desk at that point. I mean, that sparked some really great change for my business as well. So through challenges and obstacles, usually create massive opportunity for growth too, but you have to be willing to see that.
You have to be willing to see it, and you have to be willing to go through the storm.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be storms. And whether it's a walkout, a trickle, a combination, or people leaving to better themselves to go out of state because they got married and are having babies, whatever it is, there's always going to be a challenge. And it's how we respond to the challenge, not react, but respond to the challenge. And this is a big topic, and this is a heavy topic, a heavy on your heart topic.
It's a big one, yeah.
And we could go on and on and on. But the important thing, and the message that I want people to hear, is that you are not alone. And if you want to talk to anybody, there's two people sitting right here. We both have had different experiences and what a walkout looked like, but we've both been through it. And we can tell you firsthand that it is difficult, but you will make it.
You will. And I think, again, it's like knowing that you're not the only one that this has ever happened to. This has been happening since the beginning of time in hair salons. It's just your turn, unfortunately. And for those of you that might listen to this and say, wow, this has never happened to me and it never will, maybe it won't, maybe it will. There's certain things you don't have control over, but continuing to have the right attitude is what you do have control over. And knowing that you can do this and you can push through this pain. And I always say, I have a tat on my arm that from when my mom died, and it's like you embrace the pain and you burn it as fuel for your journey. And I just always think of it that way. So I encourage you to think of it that way as well, to think about taking that pain and using it as energy that will propel you into something positive as opposed to keep you in the negative.
Right. And every day, do one thing to make yourself better.
That's great advice.
Yeah. So,
I think that wraps this one up.
I think it does.
Thank you guys so much for listening and for watching. We are looking forward to the next episode. And remember, you can do this. You got this. Keep going. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Culture Curators podcast. Please like, comment, follow, and subscribe.